From the dawn of civilization, the Mediterranean Sea has a unique place in the annals of history. 3 great monotheistic faiths were born on its shores, and its waters have witnessed historic voyages of trade, exploration, and conquest. Sadly, the Mediterranean has become an amphitheater of conflicts, ecological issues, and above all, the scourge of human trafficking. Over the decades, the sea has become Europe's largest watery grave, taking into its bosom thousands of innocent people who risked life and limb in their desperate attempt to flee poverty and conflict and find a new beginning in Europe. It is in this context that the Catholic Church has been bringing together universities, religious communities, associations, and politicians of all the nations bordering this sea for the Mediterranean meetings since 2020, when it began in Italy's Bari. From Florence, where the meeting took place in 2022, it has now come to the historic French city of Marseille on the shores of the Mediterranean. The Holy Father Pope Francis is attending the final session of this year's meeting on September 23. As many as 70 bishops and 60 young people from the 30 nations around the Mediterranean are taking part in the meeting, which carries the theme Mosaic of Hope, which reflects the beauty and diversity of the region. While attending the final session of the Mediterranean meeting, Pope Francis will emphasize the importance of encounter and the beauty of diversity that is pieced harmoniously together. During the 8-day event, the attendees will take part in a host of religious, cultural, sports, and culinary events. They include visits to historic churches, abbeys, and mosques, interreligious encounters, picnics at scenic places, and food tours. Participants are also taking part in musical concerts in diverse languages, friendly football matches, and hikes. Catholic believers are attending Holy Mass, novenas, pilgrimages, and retreats that are lined up as part of this great gathering. By organizing the Mediterranean meeting here, the Church wishes to serve the unity of the human race.
Pope Francis is continuing his Mediterranean pilgrimage by visiting the French port city of Marseille. He began this journey in Italy's Lampedusa in July 2013 and has since made apostolic journeys to a number of other Mediterranean cities. The world's most dangerous migrant route is across the Mediterranean. More than 1,200 people have died in the Mediterranean Sea in 2022, adding to the horrifying tally of almost 25,000 deaths since 2014. Half of those embarking on the dangerous journey are from nations like Syria, Eritrea, Somalia, and Afghanistan, which have been ripped apart by war, widespread violence, or oppressive governments. Men, women, and increasingly unaccompanied children transiting through the Mediterranean suffer abuse at the hands of smugglers, armed groups, and private individuals who exploit their desperation. Their voyage of suffering begins in their own nations, torn apart by years of conflict and instability, starting as far away as Pakistan and continuing through the Middle East and countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Pope Francis' visit to the French port city of Marseille at the end of the Rencontres Méditerranéennes organised by the Archdiocese in September is of particular significance because it would help to highlight the need for peace and fraternity in the vast sea region, a crossroads of people, religions, languages, and cultures facing new epochal challenges. Time and again, the Holy Father has expressed solidarity with the victims of numerous Mediterranean tragedies as both the pastor of the Universal Church and the Bishop of Rome. His Marseille visit will bring global attention to the Mediterranean, its problems, its resources, and the role that Christ's followers play in this area of the world.
No, io sono in Austria, però che parte del sole, no, sempre. Siamo partiti in direzione non vedete quanto lo ringraziamo. Gente che ha bestemmiato tante ore. Bonjour. Non, non. Je crois que Marseille se prépare depuis un moment pour votre venue. Merci, madame. Venez les enfants. Venez, venez.
From the dawn of civilization, the Mediterranean Sea has a unique place in the annals of history. Three great monotheistic faiths were born on its shores, and its waters have witnessed historic voyages of trade, exploration, and conquest. Sadly, the Mediterranean has become an amphitheater of conflicts, ecological issues, and above all, the scourge of human trafficking. Over the decades, the sea has become Europe's largest watery grave, taking into its bosom thousands of innocent people who risked life and limb in their desperate attempt to flee poverty and conflict and find a new beginning in Europe. It is in this context that the Catholic Church has been bringing together universities, religious communities, associations, and politicians of all the nations bordering this sea for the Mediterranean meetings since 2020, when it began in Italy's Bari. From Florence, where the meeting took place in 2022, it has now come to the historic French city of Marseille on the shores of the Mediterranean. The Holy Father Pope Francis is attending the final session of this year's meeting on September 23. As many as 70 bishops and 60 young people from the 30 nations around the Mediterranean are taking part in the meeting, which carries the theme Mosaic of Hope, which reflects the beauty and diversity of the region. While attending the final session of the Mediterranean meeting, Pope Francis will emphasize the importance of encounter and the beauty of diversity that is pieced harmoniously together. During the 8-day event, the attendees will take part in a host of religious, cultural, sports and culinary events. They include visits to historic churches, abbeys and mosques, interreligious encounters, picnics at scenic places and food tours. Participants are also taking part in musical concerts in diverse languages, friendly football matches and hikes. Catholic believers are attending Holy Mass, novenas, pilgrimages and retreats that are lined up as part of this great gathering. By organizing the Mediterranean meeting here, the Church wishes to serve the unity of the human race.
Pope Francis is continuing his Mediterranean pilgrimage by visiting the French port city of Marseille. He began this journey in Italy's Lampedusa in July 2013 and has since made apostolic journeys to a number of other Mediterranean cities. The world's most dangerous migrant route is across the Mediterranean. More than 1,200 people have died in the Mediterranean Sea in 2022, adding to the horrifying tally of almost 25,000 deaths since 2014. Half of those embarking on the dangerous journey are from nations like Syria, Eritrea, Somalia, and Afghanistan, which have been ripped apart by war, widespread violence, or oppressive governments. Men, women, and increasingly unaccompanied children transiting through the Mediterranean suffer abuse at the hands of smugglers, armed groups, and private individuals who exploit their desperation. Their voyage of suffering begins in their own nations, torn apart by years of conflict and instability, starting as far away as Pakistan and continuing through the Middle East and countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Pope Francis' visit to the French port city of Marseille at the end of the Rencontres Méditerranéennes organised by the Archdiocese in September is of particular significance because it would help to highlight the need for peace and fraternity in the vast sea region, a crossroads of people, religions, languages, and cultures facing new epochal challenges. Time and again, the Holy Father has expressed solidarity with the victims of numerous Mediterranean tragedies as both the pastor of the Universal Church and the Bishop of Rome. His Marseille visit will bring global attention to the Mediterranean, its problems, its resources, and the role that Christ's followers play in this area of the world.
Nestled on the Gulf of Lyon, Marseille boasts a captivating natural harbor, encircled by limestone hills and embraced by the Bay of Rhone River. This multicultural gem has a rich history dating back centuries. As the capital of Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, one of France's fastest-growing regions. It thrives as the gateway between Mediterranean seaways and Northern Europe, once hidden beneath dense forests. Marseille, the third largest metropolitan area and second most populous city in France, wears its history of independence proudly, consistently defying central authority in various forms. Remarkably, it remains the capital of Bouches-du-Rhône, a status granted even during times of administrative division in France. Marseille's allure lies not only in its stunning geography, but also in its unwavering spirit of resilience and autonomy. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. One of the shortest overseas visits of the Holy Father was in 2014 when he visited the French city of Strasbourg for a few hours. Pope Francis arrived at the historic city on November 25th to address the European Parliament. During a 4-hour visit, the pontiff made a powerful speech in which he deplored Europe's high unemployment rates and immigration. He referred to Europe as being aged and haggard and expressed hope that the continent would once again be rejuvenated. During his brief visit, the Pope held talks with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and European Council President Herman Van Rompuy. It was the first visit of a sovereign pontiff to the European Parliament in 26 years. The last supreme head of the Catholic Church to address EU lawmakers was Pope St. John Paul II when he spoke to them on October 8, 1988, exactly a year before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. Marseille, a vibrant port city in southern France, boasts a rich 2,600-year history. Its Mediterranean charm is adorned with diverse historical landmarks. The Old Port, tracing back to ancient Greek and Roman times, symbolizes its maritime legacy. Nearby, Fort St. Nicholas and Fort St. John, both from the 17th century, guard the harbor, reflecting its military history. The Anchor Monument in Notre Dame de la Garde Church commemorates sailors and migrants lost in the Mediterranean. Overlooking the Old Port, the 19th century Pharaoh Palace has served as a royal residence and conference venue. Notably, it will host Pope Francis for the final session of Rencontre Méditerranéenne. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. Several legends attest to Saint Lazarus of Bethany's existence. One legend claims that anti-Christian Jews cast Christ's disciples off the coast of Galilee on a ship without a rudder, sails, or oarsmen. From Saint-Marie in Provence, they spread the good news all throughout southeastern France. Only Lazarus made it to Marseille, where he converted many to Christianity, and thus became the city's first bishop before being decapitated. He was executed in a cave under Saint-Lazare prison during the persecution by the Roman emperor. Later, his body was entombed in the Cathedral of Autun. On the other hand, residents of Marseille claim to have his skull and venerate it to this day. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. The Notre Dame de la Garde Basilica in Marseille is a breathtaking architectural masterpiece, boasting a captivating Byzantine Romanesque design. Its storied history, dating back to the 18th century, began with architect Henri-Jacques Espéragnu's visionary leadership in 1853. The Basilica's crowning jewel is an awe-inspiring golden statue of the Virgin Mary and Child Jesus, proudly perched atop its bell tower. Nestled on a hill, it has long symbolized faith and protection for sailors and Marseille's residents. Painstakingly preserved and restored, this iconic landmark retains its architectural splendor and cultural importance. On September 22nd, Pope Francis will grace Marseille with his presence, culminating in a poignant prayer service within the hallowed walls of Notre Dame de la Garde Basilica. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned.
From the dawn of civilization, the Mediterranean Sea has a unique place in the annals of history. 3 great monotheistic faiths were born on its shores, and its waters have witnessed historic voyages of trade, exploration, and conquest. Sadly, the Mediterranean has become an amphitheater of conflicts, ecological issues, and above all, the scourge of human trafficking. Over the decades, the sea has become Europe's largest watery grave, taking into its bosom thousands of innocent people who risked life and limb in their desperate attempt to flee poverty and conflict and find a new beginning in Europe. It is in this context that the Catholic Church has been bringing together universities, religious communities, associations, and politicians of all the nations bordering this sea for the Mediterranean meetings since 2020, when it began in Italy's Bari. From Florence, where the meeting took place in 2022, it has now come to the historic French city of Marseille on the shores of the Mediterranean. The Holy Father Pope Francis is attending the final session of this year's meeting on September 23. As many as 70 bishops and 60 young people from the 30 nations around the Mediterranean are taking part in the meeting, which carries the theme Mosaic of Hope, which reflects the beauty and diversity of the region. While attending the final session of the Mediterranean meeting, Pope Francis will emphasize the importance of encounter and the beauty of diversity that is pieced harmoniously together. During the 8-day event, the attendees will take part in a host of religious, cultural, sports, and culinary events. They include visits to historic churches, abbeys, and mosques, interreligious encounters, picnics at scenic places, and food tours. Participants are also taking part in musical concerts in diverse languages, friendly football matches, and hikes. Catholic believers are attending Holy Mass, novenas, pilgrimages, and retreats that are lined up as part of this great gathering. By organizing the Mediterranean meeting here, the Church wishes to serve the unity of the human race.
Pope Francis is continuing his Mediterranean pilgrimage by visiting the French port city of Marseille. He began this journey in Italy's Lampedusa in July 2013 and has since made apostolic journeys to a number of other Mediterranean cities. The world's most dangerous migrant route is across the Mediterranean. More than 1,200 people have died in the Mediterranean Sea in 2022, adding to the horrifying tally of almost 25,000 deaths since 2014. Half of those embarking on the dangerous journey are from nations like Syria, Eritrea, Somalia, and Afghanistan, which have been ripped apart by war, widespread violence, or oppressive governments. Men, women, and increasingly unaccompanied children transiting through the Mediterranean suffer abuse at the hands of smugglers, armed groups, and private individuals who exploit their desperation. Their voyage of suffering begins in their own nations, torn apart by years of conflict and instability, starting as far away as Pakistan and continuing through the Middle East and countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Pope Francis' visit to the French port city of Marseille at the end of the Rencontres Méditerranéennes organized by the Archdiocese in September is of particular significance because it would help to highlight the need for peace and fraternity in the vast sea region, a crossroads of people, religions, languages, and cultures facing new epochal challenges. Time and again, the Holy Father has expressed solidarity with the victims of numerous Mediterranean tragedies as both the pastor of the Universal Church and the Bishop of Rome. His Marseille visit will bring global attention to the Mediterranean, its problems, its resources, and the role that Christ's followers play in this area of the world.
Nestled on the Gulf of Lyon, Marseille boasts a captivating natural harbor, encircled by limestone hills and embraced by the Bay of Rhône River. This multicultural gem has a rich history dating back centuries. As the capital of Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, one of France's fastest-growing regions. It thrives as the gateway between Mediterranean seaways and Northern Europe, once hidden beneath dense forests. Marseille, the third largest metropolitan area and second most populous city in France, wears its history of independence proudly, consistently defying central authority in various forms. Remarkably, it remains the capital of Bouches-du-Rhône, a status granted even during times of administrative division in France. Marseille's allure lies not only in its stunning geography, but also in its unwavering spirit of resilience and autonomy. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. One of the shortest overseas visits of the Holy Father was in 2014, when he visited the French city of Strasbourg for a few hours. Pope Francis arrived at the historic city on November 25th to address the European Parliament. During the 4-hour visit, the pontiff made a powerful speech in which he deplored Europe's high unemployment rates and immigration. He referred to Europe as being aged and haggard and expressed hope that the continent would once again be rejuvenated. During his brief visit, the Pope held talks with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and European Council President Herman Van Rompuy. It was the first visit of a sovereign pontiff to the European Parliament in 26 years. The last supreme head of the Catholic Church to address EU lawmakers was Pope St. John Paul II when he spoke to them on October 8, 1988, exactly a year before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. Marseille, a vibrant port city in southern France, boasts a rich 2,600-year history. Its Mediterranean charm is adorned with diverse historical landmarks. The Old Port, tracing back to ancient Greek and Roman times, symbolizes its maritime legacy. Nearby, Fort St. Nicholas and Fort St. John, both from the 17th century, guard the harbor, reflecting its military history. The Anchor Monument in Notre Dame de la Garde Church commemorates sailors and migrants lost in the Mediterranean. Overlooking the Old Port, the 19th century Pharaoh Palace has served as a royal residence and conference venue. Notably, it will host Pope Francis for the final session of Rencontres Méditerranéennes. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. Several legends attest to St. Lazarus of Bethany's existence. One legend claims that anti-Christian Jews cast Christ's disciples off the coast of Galilee on a ship without a rudder, sails, or oarsmen. From Saint-Marie in Provence, they spread the good news all throughout southeastern France. Only Lazarus made it to Marseille, where he converted many to Christianity, and thus became the city's first bishop before being decapitated. He was executed in a cave under Saint-Lazare prison during the persecution by the Roman emperor. Later, his body was entombed in the Cathedral of Autun. On the other hand, residents of Marseille claim to have his skull and venerate it to this day. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned. The Notre Dame de la Garde Basilica in Marseille is a breathtaking architectural masterpiece, boasting a captivating Byzantine Romanesque design. Its storied history, dating back to the 18th century, began with architect Henri-Jacques Espéragnu's visionary leadership in 1853. The Basilica's crowning jewel is an awe-inspiring golden statue of the Virgin Mary and Child Jesus, proudly perched atop its bell tower. Nestled on a hill, it has long symbolized faith and protection for sailors and Marseille's residents. Painstakingly preserved and restored, this iconic landmark retains its architectural splendor and cultural importance. On September 22nd, Pope Francis will grace Marseille with his presence, culminating in a poignant prayer service within the hallowed walls of Notre Dame de la Garde Basilica. Watch the Apostolic Journey to Marseille in France, September 22nd and 23rd, live on Shalom World. Stay tuned.
From the dawn of civilization, the Mediterranean Sea has a unique place in the annals of history. Three great monotheistic faiths were born on its shores, and its waters have witnessed historic voyages of trade, exploration, and conquest. Sadly, the Mediterranean has become an amphitheater of conflicts, ecological issues, and above all, the scourge of human trafficking. Over the decades, the sea has become Europe's largest watery grave, taking into its bosom thousands of innocent people who risked life and limb in their desperate attempt to flee poverty and conflict and find a new beginning in Europe. It is in this context that the Catholic Church has been bringing together universities, religious communities, associations, and politicians of all the nations bordering this sea for the Mediterranean meetings since 2020, when it began in Italy's Bari. From Florence, where the meeting took place in 2022, it has now come to the historic French city of Marseille on the shores of the Mediterranean. The Holy Father Pope Francis is attending the final session of this year's meeting on September 23. As many as 70 bishops and 60 young people from the 30 nations around the Mediterranean are taking part in the meeting, which carries the theme Mosaic of Hope, which reflects the beauty and diversity of the region. While attending the final session of the Mediterranean meeting, Pope Francis will emphasize the importance of encounter and the beauty of diversity that is pieced harmoniously together. During the 8-day event, the attendees will take part in a host of religious, cultural, sports, and culinary events. They include visits to historic churches, abbeys, and mosques, interreligious encounters, picnics at scenic places, and food tours. Participants are also taking part in musical concerts in diverse languages, friendly football matches and hikes. Catholic believers are attending Holy Mass, novenas, pilgrimages and retreats that are lined up as part of this great gathering. By organizing the Mediterranean meeting here, the Church wishes to serve the unity of the human race.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. You're joining us live for Pope Francis's Marian prayer with Diocesan Clergy in Marseille's Basilica of Notre Dame de la Garde, that's Our Lady of the Garde. Wherever you're joining us from, I would like to welcome you on behalf of Vatican Media to this worldwide telecast and wish you a very happy Friday.
Some of you may be joining us through various Vatican media channels, perhaps the Vatican News live events, or the Vatican Radio app, the Vatican News English web portal, YouTube channel, or Facebook live feed. And to all of you joining us through our various media partners, welcome. These are Salt and Light TV, EWTN TV, Atmadarshan TV India, Shalom World Television Networks USA, Catholic Faith Network, Catholic TV, and UCTV, Uganda Catholic Television.
And all of you joining us through radio stations, through other local diocesan stations picking up the broadcast, or those of you picking up our shortwave radio broadcast. And lastly, to all of you joining us through internet sites and digital platforms throughout the world, welcome to you all.
My name is Francesca Merlo.
And I am Joseph Tulloch, and it is our privilege to be providing the English language commentary for you today. You can see on your screens the Cathedral of Notre Dame de la Garde. It's located on a hill near the old port of Paris. Pope Francis is on the way. Earlier you might have seen his car driving through the city, and he's just on his way here, and we'll get started soon. That's the old port of Marseille, of course, not Paris. Apologies for that.
Marseille, in fact, because Pope Francis is spending the weekend in Marseille, where he is currently undergoing his 44th Apostolic journey abroad. Now it's in the southern French city because he will be attending the concluding session of the Mediterranean meetings.
So these Mediterranean meetings are church-led initiatives which are held annually in a different city or town on the Mediterranean. The first one, I believe, was in Bari in 2020. Then there was a year out because of COVID, and then they did the next one in Florence in 2022, so both in Italy. And this year, for the first time, the meetings are being held outside of Italy, in Marseille. This edition of the meetings have brought together, I think, 70 Catholic bishops and 120 young people, aged from 20 or 25 through to 35, from all over the Mediterranean. So there's people from Italy, from France, but also from the Middle East, from Syria. I know there's a few, and then also from Ukraine. People sometimes forget that some of the southern Slavic countries are on the Mediterranean, but they are on the Black Sea, and so there are people really from all over the Mediterranean area here.
This diversity, of course, also brings people from all different faiths and religions. And for the Holy Father, the visit offers an occasion to promote fraternity, which is a theme that he has emphasized and touched upon so much throughout his pontificate, and in this occasion, especially throughout the Mediterranean, and there's a strong emphasis on migration.
And the Pope is, of course, arriving in Marseille in the middle of the Rugby World Cup 2023, which is being hosted by France. It's a week of intense excitement for the city, which is really bustling. We've heard from some of our Vatican News colleagues who were there on the ground in Marseille that they even had difficulties in finding a taxi, and they also told us that they spoke to their taxi driver and asked him what he thought about Pope Francis coming to the city, and he replied, they said, saying, "We all believe in one God, and anybody who believes in God and works for peace in the Mediterranean, I want to listen to them, and I'm interested in this visit." So that's the view of a taxi driver from Marseille.
Now, the Holy Father has only just landed in Marseille about just over an hour ago, and was greeted at the airport, and is now making his way to the Basilica, where we are expected to all join in prayer for a Marian prayer. And after that, he will be traveling close by to a memorial for the migrants and the sailors who died at sea, and we know that there are many of them, where he will pray once more with other religious leaders and hear testimonies from a migrant.
For Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline, that's the Archbishop of Marseille, one of the major highlights will be the Mass, which Pope Francis is celebrating tomorrow in the Velodrome Stadium. They're expecting, I think, about 50,000 to attend that. That'll be on Saturday afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, and the last event of the trip, basically, before the Pope returns to the Vatican. Cardinal Aveline said earlier that he thinks the Mass will, quote, bring together Marseille in all its diversity, and the French President Emmanuel Macron is also expected to be in attendance. You might be able to see on your screens now, if you're following by TV, the Pope's motorcade beginning the ascent up to the cathedral. As I said, it's located on a hill. I think it's 162 or 163 meters high. I've been there once before, actually, and you really have this view over the whole of the old city. Really, really spectacular, really stunning, and just a great setting for this first event of Pope Francis's visit here to Marseille.
The Pope is visiting Marseille, and the last time a Pope visited the city was in 1533, when Clement VII of Florence visited the city to celebrate a marriage. But it is also worth noting that Karol Wojtyla, who later, of course, as we know, became Pope John Paul II, now Saint John Paul II, actually visited the city in 1946 when he was a priest, a young seminarian, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. He actually came, I think, because of an interest in, I think I was reading this, in the worker priest movement, which was kind of taking off in France at the time, and he met with the first of the worker priests, so the worker priests with this movement of priests in France who also worked to earn a living, and the one he met with in Marseille was, or he met either with him or with some of his colleagues, was he worked in the docks. He was a dock worker. Yeah, of course, Marseille is a port city. Shipping is a very important industry here. And it looks like the motorcade is just now arriving to the cathedral. lots of cars coming. Pope Francis, I believe, is in the white car, which hasn't arrived yet.
Leading up to this this event, we've heard from several different church leaders, one of whom the Cardinal Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who, with regards to the meeting, said that all European countries must take responsibility together for the situation in the Mediterranean, far from slogans and oppositions, having in mind more the faces than the numbers of a complex and dramatic issue. And he is referring, of course, to the issue of migration in the Mediterranean. And the white car in which the Pope is has now arrived just on what I think we can describe as a facade of the Basilica, overlooking all of Marseille. It really is quite high up on a hill, I'd say. Beautiful view.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about this church is so it's dedicated to Our Lady, and it's kind of a point of reference not only for the Catholics in Marseille, but for those of all religions. And so we were hearing something earlier about the Muslims and people of other faiths who live in Marseille and like to come here and entrust themselves to the Virgin Mary. And of course, interfaith relations will be a focus point for this trip, and later on there'll be a meeting with religious leaders of various faiths. For now, of course, the Pope is meeting with the clergy from the Diocese of Marseille. That's the first event on his agenda, but much more to follow after that.
So now, for those of you who cannot see a screen, the Holy Father has got out of the car and he's grinning away. He's always very happy to meet people, faithful and people of other religions around the world, as we know. And we are expecting, first of all, to hear a greeting from the Cardinal Archbishop of Marseille, who is Jean-Marc Aveline. And now images are being shown of inside the Basilica, as where the faithful are patiently waiting for Pope Francis to arrive.
Yeah, so this church is officially known, as I said, as Notre Dame de la Garde, Our Lady of the Garde, but the locals often refer to it as La Bonne Mère, the Good Mother, and that's because it has historically been a symbol of hope and protection for sailors, for fishermen, and for the people of Marseille. It's one of the most famous buildings in the old city, but of course just a really fitting location for the start of this trip, which is so dedicated to migrants, to refugees, for those people that have had to make this really difficult journey on the sea from their countries of origin, or from North Africa often, even if that's not their country of origin, to Europe.
Now, as we are being shown images of the interior of the church, I think it might be worth noting that it is decorated by more than 1,200 square meters of Byzantine-style mosaics, beautiful marbles, white marble from Carrara in Italy, and red marble from Brignoles, which is in France. And there are about 380 square meters of Roman mosaics laid out in geometric design all over the floors.
There are also, all over the interior, lots of votos, I'm reading, made to the Virgin, especially by sailors. So these are model boats, paintings and plaques, and I think left here in the Basilica to kind of entrust the people who are leaving them to the Virgin Mary, often sailors, as we were saying, maybe about to undertake a bit of a hazardous voyage. And outside the Basilica, there's a famous statue of Saint Veronica wiping the face of Jesus as he carried the cross, and that was constructed in memory of the missionaries who left the cathedral in the 19th and 20th centuries to proclaim the gospel and they prayed that on their journey they would be protected by Our Lady of the Garde. So those of you who are watching on TV can see some images of the outside of the Basilica right now. It's quite a recent building, actually. It was built in 1853 and completed 11 years later. It's, as Francesca was saying, it's Neo-Byzantine in style, so you can see some of those golden mosaics. They're very, very typical of the Byzantine style. I'm reading, there's a drawbridge. I'm not sure entirely where that is, but that's quite an interesting architectural feature of this cathedral. We'll see if we can locate the drawbridge at any point in this transmission. So we're just waiting basically for Pope Francis to make his entrance into the cathedral. You can see we've got many of the bishops of the area gathered, as well as some who've come with Pope Francis from the Vatican. You might be able to see there in the front row Cardinal Michael Czerny. He's the prefect of the Vatican's dicastery for promoting integral human development, which is the Vatican office that looks after the Church's social teaching, let's say, and particularly put it into practice. And one of his main concerns is migrants and refugees. So I think that's why he's here accompanying the Pope on this particular journey. Cardinal Czerny famously had his first pectoral cross made from the wood of a boat that had carried refugees to Lampedusa in Sicily. So Lampedusa is this island where many refugees arrive, and Cardinal Czerny had his first pectoral cross constructed from the wood of those boats. I don't know if that's the same one that he still wears today. It might well be, but anyway, very fitting and very in keeping with the purpose of this journey of Pope Francis to Marseille. So we're going to hear in a few moments from the Cardinal Archbishop of Marseille, that's Jean-Marc Aveline. He's quite a close collaborator of Pope Francis, and he's certainly been the driving force behind this edition of the Mediterranean meetings. I'm not sure, I don't remember now to what extent he was involved with the earlier ones, but certainly he's been collaborating very closely with Pope Francis to organise this one. And this, I can see some movement here now. Perhaps, yep, and here's the Pope. He's being wheeled. Pope Francis, of course, is in a wheelchair due to a knee injury that he's been nursing for a while now, and it looks like he's just being wheeled into the Basilica. And we're about to begin. You can hear the organ, faithful getting to their feet. So Pope Francis just blessing some of the faithful there, and now being brought up the aisle in his wheelchair.
Looks like we have a full house.
Yeah, it really does. So it's not a huge church, but it's very much full to the brim. I think that's Cardinal Aveline there just behind Pope Francis.
They're walking up the aisle together, and Pope Francis is about to get out of his wheelchair and sit on his chair.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we're just narrating that for those of you who are listening over the radio. So we have kind of a white chair that's been placed right in the centre of the church in front of the altar, and I think that's where Pope Francis is. Oh, perhaps not. Perhaps that's not where he's about to sit. We'll see.
For those of you listening via radio, surely have the pleasure of hearing the choir singing, accompanying the Holy Father's entrance to the Basilica. Father is blessing a candle, quite a large candle, which is now being positioned behind the altar.
This is a hymn to the Virgin Mary that's being sung, for those of you who don't know French.
The text of this. No, excuse me.
Now we'll hear from Cardinal Aveline. I think perhaps there'll be a brief rite of introduction from the Holy Father just before. So the faithful are just observing a moment of silence here before the start of this Marian prayer, and we can join them in that moment of silence, moment of prayer, before we get started here.
And now the Holy Father is, as we'd imagined before, getting up and sitting in this beautiful white chair at the end of the aisle and in front of the altar.
And that's, for those of you watching on the television, that's Cardinal Aveline standing just to the Pope's right, and I think he's about to begin his address.
Benvenuto a Marsiglia, Santo Padre.
Welcome to Marseille, Holy Father.
Benvenuto in questa città
Welcome to a city that was so eager to welcome you.
Mardi dernier,
Last
il y a quelques
Last
jours,
Tuesday,
avant
a
votre
few days
départ,
ago, before your
vous êtes
departure,
allé confier ce voyage,
you entrusted
comme
this
chaque
journey,
fois, à la Vierge
as
Marie,
always, to the
en
Virgin Mary,
priant devant l'icône
praying
du
before
Salus
the
Populi
icon
Romani.
of Mary Salus
Et
Populi Romani.
Aujourd'hui, dès votre arrivée,
And
vous
as
avez
soon as you
voulu
arrived,
faire comme nous faisons ici,
you wanted to do as we
chaque
do
fois qu'un
here,
événement heureux
every time
ou malheureux
something happy
surgit dans
or
notre
unhappy
existence.
happens in our lives.
Marseillais de toute confession,
People from Marseille,
de toute
of
religion,
all faiths and
nous
religions,
montons sur cette colline
we go up
pour nous
this hill
confier à la Vierge
to
Marie.
entrust ourselves to the
Ici,
Virgin Mary,
nous appelons la Bonne Mère.
the Virgin of La Garde, whom we here call La Bonne Mère, the Good
Mais il n'y
Mother.
a pas que les Marseillais qui montent à
But
la
it's
Bonne
not
Mère.
just the people of Marseille
Ici,
who go up to the
Saint
Good
Charles
Mother.
de Foucault
Here,
venait
Saint
prier
Charles de
à chacun
Foucault
de ses passages
used
à
to come to
Marseille,
pray whenever he
avant
passed through
ou
Marseille,
après ses nombreuses
before or
traversées
after
de la Méditerranée.
his many crossings of the Mediterranean.
Ici,
Here,
la petite Thérèse
the little
de Lisieux,
Thérèse of
en
Lisieux,
pèlerinage vers
on her
Rome,
pilgrimage to
est
Rome,
venue confier à la
came to
Vierge
confide
son
in the
projet de
Virgin
demander au pape
her plan to ask the Pope to
d'entrer au
authorize
Carmel
her to
malgré son
enter the
jeune âge.
Carmelite convent
Ici,
despite her young
la
age.
jeune Mariam,
Here, a
originaire de
young
Palestine,
Mariam, originally from
travaillant à
Palestine
Marseille au service d'une
and working in
famille
Marseille
libanaise,
for a Lebanese
est
family,
venue régulièrement
regularly came to
demander
ask
à
Mary to
Marie
light the way
d'éclairer le
for her
chemin de sa
vocation.
vocation. Ici,
Here,
le jeune
the
abbé
young
polonais
Polish
Karol
priest
Wojtyła,
Karol Wojtyła,
alors qu'il était étudiant
while
à
he was a
Rome,
student in Rome,
vint célébrer
came to
l'Eucharistie
celebrate
juste avant
the
de se
Eucharist
rendre au
just before
presbytère
going
où
to the
vivait Jacques Leuve,
presbytery
ce
where Jacques
dominicain
Leuve, The Dominican who was the first worker priest in France, lived employed as a docker in the port of Marseille. You too are welcome, Most Holy Father. And Pope Francis just saying something back to him that our microphones didn't catch, but smiling very broadly. The priests of the diocese, the permanent deacons and their wives, the seminarians and all the local superiors of the religious communities present in Marseille are delighted to be able to pray with you for a moment. I would like to also welcome the rectors of the Mediterranean Marian shrines who are here today and who were very keen to join us. They know, especially the priests, because it is their deepest vocation, that we always have to learn from Mary, to look at God with the eyes of the people, bringing before him the prayers and supplications of all, and also to look at the people with the eyes of God, eyes full of goodness, encouragement and mercy. With you, Most Holy Father, with all the pilgrims who for more than 800 years have climbed this hill to ask and to give thanks, as attested by the many ex-votos and models of ships which are scattered throughout the shrine. With them we entrust to the Virgin Mary all the inhabitants of the shores of the Mediterranean and all those sailors or migrants who face the perils of the sea. Dear Pope Francis, we've been watching you. We've seen that every time you receive groups or individuals, every time you end an audience, you say, and don't forget to pray for me. Pope Francis smiles, and it looks like he's agreeing there. So the rector of the shrine came up with the idea of asking the people of Marseille to pray for you and to place a written record of some of the prayers in a heart similar to those that adorn the walls of this basilica. It is this and they're going to write their first names and their second name because they prayed for you. And it is this heart that the rector is now going to offer you. It's a gift from the people of Marseille to you as a symbol of their affection and gratitude. As you know, the Diocese of Marseille was the first in the world to be consecrated to the Sacred Heart during the plague epidemic of November 1720. Today, the heart we are offering you is small, but as Saint Thérèse of Lisieux, your favorite saint, used to say, nothing is small for a great love. In these hearts there is all the love of the people of Marseille for you. Thank you, Most Holy Father, for coming to pray with us this evening. Pope Francis now rising to his feet and embracing Cardinal Aveline. That's a very nice moment. Very nice to see that. And this is the heart that Cardinal Aveline was speaking of now being presented to the Holy Father. And in that the notes and the names of the people of Marseille, which have been left for him. And Pope Francis now opening with a liturgical greeting.
Como
now hearing Psalm 44. We have heard it with our ears, O God. Our ancestors have told us what you did in their days, in days long ago. With your hand you drove out the nations and planted our ancestors. You crushed the peoples and made our ancestors flourish. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your right hand, your arm, and the light of your face, for you loved them. You are my King and my God, who decrees victories for Jacob. Through you we push back our enemies, through your name we trample our foes. I put no trust in my bow, my sword does not bring me victory. But you give us victory over our enemies, you put our adversaries to shame. In God we make all our boast all day long, and we will praise your name forever. But now you have rejected and humbled us. You no longer go out with our armies. You made us retreat before the enemy, and our adversaries have plundered us. You gave us up to be devoured like sheep, and have scattered us among the nations. You sold your people for a pittance, gaining nothing from their sale. You have made us a reproach to our neighbors, the scorn and derision of those around us. You have made us a byword among the nations. The peoples shake their heads at us. I live in disgrace all day long, and my face is covered with shame, and the taunts of those who reproach and revile me, because of the enemy who is bent on revenge. All this came upon us, though we had not forgotten you. We had not been false to your covenant. Our hearts had not turned back, our feet had not strayed from your path. But you crushed us and made us a haunt for jackals. You covered us over with deep darkness. If we had forgotten the name of our God, or spread out our hands to a foreign god, would not God have discovered it, since he knows the secrets of the heart? Yet for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. Awake, Lord. Why do you sleep? Rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? We are brought down to the dust. Our bodies cling to the ground. Rise up and help us. Rescue us because of your unfailing love.
So that was Psalm 44, and we now hear a reading from the prophet Zephaniah, chapter 3, verses 14 to 17.
Pousse des cris de joie, fille de Sion.
Sing,
Éclate en
daughter Zion.
ovation, Israël.
Shout aloud, Israel.
Réjouis-toi
Be glad
de tout ton
and
cœur.
rejoice with all your heart,
Bondis de joie, fille
daughter
de
Jerusalem.
Jérusalem. Le Seigneur
The
a
Lord
levé les
has taken
sentences
away
qui
your
pesaient
punishment.
sur toi. Il a
He has
écarté
turned back
tes ennemis.
your enemy.
Le roi
The Lord,
d'Israël,
the King of
le
Israel,
Seigneur,
is with you.
est en toi. Tu n'as
Never
plus à
again
craindre
will
le
you
malheur.
fear any harm.
Ce jour-là,
On that day,
on dira à
they will
Jérusalem,
say to Jerusalem,
ne crains pas, Sion.
do not fear, Zion.
Ne laisse pas tes mains
Do not
défaillir.
let your hands hang limp.
Le Seigneur ton Dieu
The
est
Lord
en
your
toi.
God is with you,
C'est lui,
the mighty
le héros
warrior
qui
who
apporte le
saves.
salut.
He will take great delight in
Il
you.
aura en toi sa joie et son allégresse.
In
Il te
his love,
renouvellera
he will
par
no
son
longer
amour.
rebuke you,
Il
but
exultera
will
pour
rejoice
toi
over you
et se
with
réjouira
singing.
comme au jour de fête.
And we'll now hear from the Holy Father Pope Francis.
The Holy Father is preparing to read his discourse, putting his glasses on and being handed his text.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buon après-midi.
Dear brothers and sisters, bon après-midi, good afternoon. I am happy to begin my visit by sharing this moment of prayer with you. I thank Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline for his words of welcome, and I greet His Excellence Archbishop Éric de Moulin-Beaufort, my brothers bishops, the rectors, and all of you, priests, deacons, seminarians, and consecrated men and women. You who work in this archdiocese with generosity and dedication to building a society of encounter with God and neighbor. Thank you for your presence, thank you for your service, and thank you for your prayers. In coming to Marseille, I found myself in the company of some of the greats, Saints Thérèse of the Child Jesus, Charles de Foucault and John Paul II, and so many others who came here to entrust themselves to Notre Dame de la Garde. We place under her mantle the fruit of the Rencontre Méditerranée, together with the expectations and hopes of your hearts. In the biblical reading, the prophet Zephaniah exhorted us to joy and confidence. He reminded us that the Lord our God is not far away, but rather He is here, near us, in order to save us. In a way, this message reminds us of the history of this basilica and what it represents. And in fact, it was not founded in memory of a miracle or a particular apparition, but simply because since the 13th century, the holy people of God have sought and found here, on the hill of La Garde, the presence of the Lord through the eyes of His Holy Mother. That is why for centuries the people of Marseille, and especially those who navigate the waves of the Mediterranean, have been coming up here to pray. It was the holy people of God that created this holy place, this holy sanctuary, and it is infallible. Still today, the Bonne Mère brings about for all people a very tender intersection of gazes. The first is that of Jesus, to whom Mary always directs our attention, and whose love is reflected in her eyes.
Dall'altra parte, quelli di tanti uomini e donne di oggi, di ogni età e condizione che egli raccoglie.
The other is that of countless men and women of all ages and conditions. She gathers them all together and brings them to God, as we recalled at the beginning of this prayer, placing a lighted candle at Our Lady's feet. Marseille is a veritable meeting point of peoples, and it is precisely on this intersection of gazes that I would like to reflect with you, because it seems to express well the Marian dimension of our ministry. In fact, we priests and consecrated persons and deacons, we are also called to help people sense the gaze of Jesus, and at the same time to bring the gaze of our brothers and sisters to Jesus. In the former, we are bearers of mercy, and in the latter, we are intercessors. The first gaze. The first gaze is that of Jesus, which tenderly caresses all men and women. He looks intently at us from head to toe, not to judge, but to lift up those who are lowly. His gaze is full of the tenderness that shines in Mary's eyes. And we who are called to reflect this gaze are compelled to be humbled, so that in compassion we can make our own the encouraging benevolence of the Good Shepherd. Let us not forget that the style of Jesus is that of closeness, tenderness, and compassion. And just like that, the Good Shepherd who does not reprove the lost sheep, but carries it on his shoulders and celebrates for its return to the fold. The Holy Father is saying that he likes to think that the Lord does not know how to shake his finger at you in disapproval. Brothers and sisters, let us learn from this gaze. Let us not allow a day to pass without remembering when we ourselves have felt it rest upon us. Don't forget closeness, compassion, and tenderness. Let us open the doors, not only of churches and rectories, but especially of the heart, to show through our meekness, kindness, and acceptance the face of our Lord. Whoever approaches you must not find aloofness or judgment, but the testimony of a humble joy, more fruitful than any display of ability. May people wounded by life find a safe harbor in your gaze. Encouragement in your embrace, and a caress in your hands, which is capable of wiping away their tears. Even with all the many daily concerns, I beg you, do not detract from the warmth of God's paternal and maternal gaze. And you, priests, in the sacrament of reconciliation, forgive always. Be generous with that. Forgive. With God's forgiveness, many doors are opened in life.
Per sciogliere attraverso la grazia gli uomini dalle catene del peccato e liberarli da blocchi, rimorsi, rancori, eppure contro cui da soli non possono.
It is marvelous to generously dispense His forgiveness, that is, to always loosen the chains of sin through grace and free people from these obstacles, regrets, grudges, and fears against which they cannot prevail alone. It is beautiful to rediscover with wonder, at every age and happy and sad moments, the joy of illuminating lives through the sacraments, and of transmitting, in the name of God, unexpected hopes for His consoling presence, healing compassion, and moving tenderness. Closeness, compassion, and tenderness. Be close to all, especially the frail and less fortunate, and never let those who suffer lack your attentive and discreet closeness. In this way there will grow in them, and also in you, the faith that animates the present, the hope that opens to the future, and the charity that lasts forever. This is the first step. Bring the gaze of Jesus to your brothers and sisters. There is only one moment in life in which it is acceptable to look someone from up to down, and that is only when we bend over to help pick them up. All the other moments are
Guardate le persone che stanno nel basso e che con la mano conscio o inconscio
all the other moments are just sin of pride.
prendili per mano e togli il soldo.
You must take them by the hand and help them up. That's a beautiful gesture.
Fare senza tenerezza.
And it's a gesture that cannot be done without
E poi c'è il
tenderness.
secondo sguardo,
And
quello
then there
degli
is the second
uomini e
gaze,
delle donne che si
that of the
rivolgono a
men and
Gesù.
women who turn to Jesus.
Come Maria che a Cana ha accolto e portato
Like Mary, who
davanti
at Cana first took on and then brought before the Lord the concerns of two
anche voi
young
siete chiamati a
newlyweds,
farvi per gli altri.
you too are called to be a voice of
Uomini e
intercession
donne
for
per
others.
gli altri. Voce che intercede.
Intercession
Allora
for
la
others.
recita del breviario,
A voice that
la
intercedes.
meditazione quotidiana della parola, il rosario.
In this way, the recitation of the breviary,
Vi raccomando
daily
specialmente
meditation on the
quella
Word, the
dell'adorazione.
Rosary, and every other prayer.
Noi abbiamo perso un po' il senso
I recommend
dell'adorazione.
especially that of adoration. We've sort of lost the sense of adoration,
Tutte queste
and
preghiere
we must pick it
saranno
up again.
affollati dai volti di quanti la provvidenza vi mette sul cammino.
All these prayers will be crowded with the faces of those whom Providence places on your
Le loro
path.
voci, le loro domande.
You will bring with you their eyes, voices, and questions to the Eucharistic table before the tabernacle or to the silence of your room where the Father sees you. You will be their faithful echo as intercessors, angels on earth, that is, messengers, who bring everything before the glory of the Lord. I would like to summarize this brief meditation by drawing your attention to three images of Mary, which are venerated in this basilica.
La prima è la grande immagine che svetta sulla cima.
The first is the large statue that towers over its summit.
Gesù, che benedice il bambino.
It depicts Mary holding the child Jesus in the act of blessing. Like Mary, let us bring the blessing of peace and peace of Jesus everywhere, in every family and heart.
E lo sguardo di misericordia.
It is the gaze of
La seconda
mercy.
immagine si trova sotto di noi.
The second image is below us in the crypt.
È la Verge au bouquet.
It is the Verge au bouquet, the Virgin of the bouquet,
Il bambino
a
Gesù.
gift from a
E ce lo
generous
mostra.
layman.
Ma nell'altra mano, al
She
posto
too
del
carries the
sceptro,
child Jesus in one arm and shows him to us, but in the other hand, instead of a scepter, she holds a bouquet of flowers.
mentre ci presenta il suo figlio,
It makes us think of how
presenta
Mary,
noi
model
a
of the
lui
church, while
come
she
un
presents her
massimo
son to
di
us,
fiori,
also
in ciascuna
presents us to him,
persona è
like a
unica
bouquet of flowers,
e bella,
in which each
e
person is
preziosa
unique,
agli occhi del
beautiful and precious in the eyes
Padre.
of
Lo
the Father.
sguardo di intercessione.
It is the gaze of intercession.
Questo è molto importante. Intercessione.
This is very important. Intercession.
Il primo era lo sguardo della misericordia della Madonna. Questo è lo
The first
sguardo
was the look of mercy.
di intercessione.
This is a look of
Infine, la terza
intercession.
immagine,
And finally,
quella
the
che
third
vediamo qui al
image
centro sull'altare,
is the one we
che
see here in the
colpisce per lo
center on the
splendore che
altar,
irradia.
which is
Anche
striking
noi,
for
cari
the
fratelli e
splendor it
sorelle,
radiates.
diventiamo Vangelo
We
vivo
too, dear brothers
nella
and
missione
sisters,
da
become a living
misura
gospel
in cui lo
to the extent
doniamo,
that we go out of
uscendo da
ourselves
noi
to
stessi,
share it,
riflettendosi la
reflecting
luce e
its
la
light
bellezza, con una
and
vita
beauty,
umile, gioiosa,
with a humble,
ricca di cielo
joyful life,
Ci
rich in
siano
apostolic
testimoni
zeal.
questi tanti missionari
May the many
partiti
missionaries
da questo alto luogo
who set out from this lofty
la
place
buona novella di
to
Gesù
proclaim the good
Cristo
news of Jesus
nel mondo
Christ
intero.
to the whole world be a source
Carissimi,
of encouragement to us.
portiamo ai fratelli lo sguardo di
Dear
Dio,
friends, let us bring God's gaze to our
portiamo
brothers
a
and
Dio
sisters.
la sete dei fratelli.
Let us bring their
Portiamo la
thirst to
gioia del
God.
Vangelo,
Let us
la
spread the
nostra
joy of the
vita,
gospel.
ed è incredibilmente bella,
This is our life,
nonostante le
and it is
fatiche, le
incredibly
carenze,
beautiful,
anche in-
despite hardships and failures.
Preghiamo insieme la Madonna
Let us pray together to Our Lady
che ci custodisca.
that she may accompany us and keep us.
E voi per favore pregate per me. Grazie.
And you, please, pray for me. Thank you.
now the whole congregation will recite a Marian prayer led by the Holy Father. I believe Pope Francis will be reading it in French. Text now being brought to the Holy Father, and we begin the prayer.
Vierge Marie,
Virgin Mary, I have come to pray to you. You whom I call here Our Lady of the Garde. You present your Son to me. He says to me, "This is your mother. I am and I want to remain your child. Keep me healthy in body and in soul. Keep also those who are dear to me healthy. Help us to be faithful to the faith of our baptism and obedient to everything your Son asks of us. Help us to love all those around us. May our love radiate kindness, understanding and forgiveness. Help us to serve our brothers and sisters. Support us in times of trial. Protect all those who suffer in body and in heart. O Virgin of the Garde, my Heavenly Mother, I come to you with the heart of a child. Pray for us to your Son Jesus. Obtain for us the grace to love him more and more, and to be more like him every day. Amen. And the Holy Father will now end this prayer service.
Que le nom du Seigneur soit béni. Nos secours est dans le nom du Seigneur. Que Dieu Tout-Puissant vous bénisse, le Père, le Fils et le Saint-Esprit.
That was an apostolic blessing from the Holy Father, and that brings this Marian prayer service with the Diocesan Clergy of the Diocese of Marseille to an end. And we hear again that wonderful choir singing yet another Marian hymn.
Father is just listening to the music in personal silent reflection, and we can see the choir up above, quite high up in the Basilica, and the cardinals singing along, Cardinal Czerny, Cardinal Parolin there singing along to the hymn. the cardinals and bishops who were sitting near the Holy Father are leaving the Basilica, and the Holy Father too is getting up and will shortly be leaving himself.
Yeah, it looks like he's just taking a brief moment of prayer in front of that wonderful statue of the Madonna there before he heads out. Ave Gratia Plena is written behind it. Hail, full of grace. Those are words from the Gospel of Luke and also from the beginning of the Hail Mary prayer. Is processing out down the main aisle. Looks like he's just stopped to bless an artifact that's been presented to him. There's some applause that you might be able to hear. The organ playing, joined by Cardinal Avelin, who, as I was saying, has been so instrumental in putting together this this visit from the Pope, and also this series of Mediterranean meetings which the Pope will be attending tomorrow. I've been taken back out to the front. We have a wonderful view of the bay there. The sun looks like it's just about setting in Marseille, but it's not the end of the day for Pope Francis. He has coming up quite soon a meeting with religious leaders that'll be held at a monument that's not too far from the Basilica.
The upcoming meeting now with religious leaders is dedicated to the migrants and the sailors and the people who have lost their lives at sea, and in fact it will be taking place at a memorial, as Joe said, close to the cathedral, and the memorial is dedicated to all those who have lost their lives at sea, and in particular the migrants and the sailors.
So it looks like here we've got many of the bishops that are accompanying Pope Francis processing over to that monument that Francesca was telling you about, where shortly the next event on Pope Francis' schedule will be beginning. Pope Francis, I'm sure, is also on his way.
Just a little bit of information about the cross, the memorial cross where the Pope will be playing. It's called the Camargue cross, and it brings together the symbols of the three theological virtues, which are faith, hope and charity. Faith is represented by the Latin cross, and hope is represented by an anchor, and charity is represented by a heart. And we can see the Holy Father is being wheeled over to the memorial as we speak.
Yeah, there's a much larger crowd of religious leaders here. I suppose they weren't all able to fit in the cathedral before. I spotted among them Bishop Jacques Murad. He is a Syrian bishop. He was at the time as a monk. He was captured by the Islamic State, so-called Islamic State, and kept in captivity by them for some months. And just very recently he's been made a bishop in the Syriac Catholic Church. He's here, of course, as Syria is also a Mediterranean country and very much part of what's being considered here in the Mediterranean meetings and in this trip to Marseille. So really lovely to see Bishop Jacques Murad there.
Just looking back at the meeting that has just finished, the Marian prayer service, in his address, the Holy Father, he recalled that the church in which the meeting took place, the cathedral, was not founded as the result of a miracle or apparition, but because the people of God in Marseille sought and found here the presence of the Lord through the eyes of His Holy Mother.
Pope Francis is now meeting, this is an Orthodox bishop by the looks of it. There are lots of leaders from, not just from the Roman Catholic Church I saw earlier, also representatives of the Eastern Catholic churches. Here, Pope Francis is greeting a member of the Jewish community, and so there's an interreligious character to the prayer service we're about to witness. And the Holy Father is up on the stage with some of those leaders of different faiths and religions that Joe was mentioning earlier. It looks like they are posing for a photo. And now they're all taking their seats. And Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline is about to speak.
Très Saint-Père, nous venons de prier dans cette belle basilique.
Most Holy Father, we have just prayed in this Basilica of Notre Dame de la Garde, so dear to the hearts of the people of Marseille. And now we stand before this stele erected here, facing the sea, in homage to the sailors and migrants who perished in the shroud of the waves. This is undoubtedly one of the most moving stops on your journey to Marseille. We all know that the Mediterranean, so beautiful and peaceful, can also become a cruel cemetery. When sailors disappear at sea, it is of course a tragedy for their families, but it was part of the risks of their profession. But when men, women and children who know nothing about sailing, fleeing misery and war, are robbed of their possessions by dishonest smugglers who condemn them to death by putting them on old and dangerous boats, that's a crime. And when political institutions prohibit non-governmental organizations and even ships sailing in these waters from coming to the aid of shipwrecked people, this is an equally serious crime and a violation of the most basic international maritime law.
vous remercie chaleureusement pour le courage.
Those who are here with you this evening, Most Holy Father, warmly thank you for the courage and tenacity with which, for 10 years, since your very first trip to Lampedusa, you have defended the cause of migrants against all odds. Yes, on behalf of us all, thank you, dear Pope Francis.
Sont ici présents des responsables d'associations.
Here with us are leaders of associations that work in the service of migrants.
À vos côtés, les responsables de Stella Maris, le service international.
By your sides are representatives of Stella Maris, the International Maritime Pastoral Service, which is very active in the port of Marseille, involving both the Diocese of Marseille and Aix-en-Provence. But above all, I would like to highlight the presence of leaders of all the religions present in this city. And I would like to wish well to our Jewish brothers and sisters who are celebrating the Shabbat. The city of Marseille was a pioneer when, in 1919, at the instigation of its mayor, Robert Vigouroux, it set up a body called Marseille Espérance, which brings together all these leaders on a regular basis within the framework of Republican secularism, in order to work together to ensure peace and social cohesion in our great city.
Michel Rubirola, puis Benoît Payan.
Successive mayors, Jean-Claude Gaudin, Michel Rubirola, and then Benoît Payan, have been keen to encourage this contribution of religions to peace, and we are grateful to them for this. With you, Most Holy Father, we would now like to reflect on the faces of the women, men, and children who every day, and perhaps even this evening, struggle to survive and hope for help. In Italian, the Cardinal says, "Thank you, dear Pope Francis, for accompanying and guiding us. Thank you." The Cardinal and the Holy Father embraced before sitting down side by side, and now we reflect in silence as we are expected now to hear the discourse of the Holy Father.
Cardinal Belen, merci beaucoup. Vous êtes courageuse. Cari fratelli e sorelle,
dear brothers and
grazie per
sisters,
essere qui.
thank you for being here.
Dinanzi a noi c'è il mare, fonte di vita.
Before us is the sea,
Ma
a
questo
source of
luogo
life.
evoca la tragedia dei naufragi.
Yet this
che
place
provocano
evokes the
morte.
tragedy of shipwrecks,
Siamo
which cause
riuniti
death.
in memoria di coloro che non ce l'hanno fatta,
We are gathered in memory of those who did not make it,
che non sono stati salvati.
those who were not saved.
Non abituamoci a considerare i naufragi come fatti di cronaca.
Let us not get used to considering shipwrecks as news stories and deaths at sea as
Sono
numbers.
nomi e cognomi.
No,
Sono
they are
volti
names
e storie.
and surnames.
Sono vite spezzate.
They are faces and
e sogni
stories.
infranti.
They are broken lives and shattered dreams.
Penso a tanti fratelli e sorelle annegati nella paura.
I think of so many brothers and
insieme alle
sisters
speranze
drowned in
che
fear,
portavano nel
along with the hopes they carried in their hearts.
Davanti a un simile dramma non servono parole, ma
Faced with such a drama, We need
Prima
deeds,
ancora,
not words.
però, serve umanità.
Before that, however, we
Serve
need
silenzio,
humanity,
pianto, compassione e preghiera.
silence, weeping, compassion and
Invito
prayer.
ora a un momento di silenzio.
I now invite you to spend a
memoria
moment
di
of
questi
silence
nostri
in memory
fratelli
of these brothers
e
and sisters of
sorelle.
ours.
Lasciamoci toccare
Let us be
dalle loro
moved
tragedie.
by their tragedies.
Troppe persone in fuga dai conflitti
Too many people fleeing conflict,
ambientali
poverty and environmental disasters in the search for a better future find in the waves of the Mediterranean Sea the ultimate rejection.
E così questo splendido mare è diventato un enorme cimitero.
And so this beautiful sea has become a huge cemetery where many brothers and sisters are deprived even of the right to a grave.
Seppellita è solo la dignità umana.
Being buried at sea is the only dignity given them. In the book Testimony, Little Brother, the protagonist at the end of the troubled journey that takes him from the Republic of Guinea to Europe says, "When you sit above the sea, you are at a crossroads. On one side is life, on the other is death. There are no other choices."
Anche davanti a noi si pone un bivio
Dear friends, we too are at a crossroads. On the one hand, there is fraternity, which makes the human community flourish with goodness, and on the other, indifference, which bloodies the Mediterranean. We find ourselves at a crossroads of civilization. Either the culture of fraternity and humanity, or that of indifference. We cannot be resigned to seeing human beings treated as bargaining chips, imprisoned and tortured in atrocious ways. And often when we send them away, they are tortured and imprisoned.
Non possiamo più assistere ai drammi dei naufragi dovuti a traffici odiosi.
We can no longer watch the drama of shipwrecks caused by the cruel trafficking and the fanaticism of indifference.
Le persone che rischiano di annegare quando vengono abbandonate sulle onde.
People who are at risk of drowning when abandoned on the waves must be rescued. It is a duty of humanity. It is a duty of civilization.
Il cielo ci benedirà se in terra e sul mare sapremo perderci cura.
God will bless us if on land and at sea we know how to take care of the weakest. If we can overcome the paralysis of fear and the disinterest that, with velvet gloves, condemns others to death. In this, we representatives of different religions are called to be an example. God indeed blessed Father Abraham. He was called to leave his homeland, and he left not knowing where he was to go. As a guest and pilgrim in a foreign land, he welcomed the wayfarers who passed by his tent. Exiled from his homeland and homeless himself, he was both a home and homeland for all.
E a ricompensa della sua ospitalità ottenne di avere una discendenza. Alle radici dei tre monoteismi mediterranei.
And as a reward for his hospitality, he received the gift of posterity. Thus, at the roots of the three Mediterranean monotheistic religions is hospitality, love for the stranger in the name of God. And this is vital if, like our father Abraham, we dream of a prosperous future.
L'orfano, la vedova e il migrante.
Let us not forget in the Bible the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner, the stranger. This is what God invites us to protect. We believers then must be exemplary in mutual and fraternal welcome.
Spesso non sono facili I rapporti tra I gruppi religiosi, con il tarlo dell'estremismo.
Relations between religious groups are often not easy, with the woodworm of extremism and the ideological plague of fundamentalism that corrode the authentic life of communities. In this regard, I would like to echo what a man of God who lived not far from here wrote. Let no one keep in his heart hatred for his neighbor, but love instead. For if a man feels hatred toward even one person, he cannot be at peace with God. A man's prayer is not heard by God as long as anger is stored up in his soul. Today, Marseille, too, characterized by a diverse religious pluralism, stands at a crossroad, encounter or confrontation. I thank all of you who choose the path of encounter. Thank you for your solidarity and concrete commitment to promoting human development and integration. It is good that you have here, along with various groups that work with migrants, Marseille Espérance, an organization for interreligious dialogue that promotes fraternity and peaceful coexistence. We look to the pioneers and witnesses of dialogue, just as Jules Isaac, who lived nearby and whose 60th anniversary of death was recently commemorated. You are the Marseille of the future. Go forward without being discouraged, so that this city may be for France and for Europe and for the world a mosaic of hope.
Come auspico vorrei infine citare alcune parole che David Sassoli.
As a parting wish, I would like to quote some words of David Sassoli, spoken in Bari, on the occasion of a previous meeting on the Mediterranean.
Nella casa della saggezza del califfo Al-Mamun si incontravano ebrei.
In Baghdad, in the house of wisdom of Caliph Al-Mamun, Jews, Christians and Muslims used to meet to read the sacred books and Greek philosophers. Today we all feel, believers and non-believers alike, the need to rebuild that house, to continue together, to fight idols, tear down walls, build bridges, and give substance to a new humanism. To look deeply at our own time and to love it even more when it is hard to love. I believe it is a seed sown in these days when we are so attentive to our destiny. Enough of being afraid of the problems that the Mediterranean subjects to us. For the European Union and for all of us, our survival depends on this. Brothers and sisters, let us face these problems together. Let us not cause hope to shipwreck. Let us together make a mosaic of peace. And it is so nice here to see so many of you here who go out to sea to save the migrants.
Mi impediscono di andare perché alla nave manca qualcosa, manca quell'altra. Sono
especially as so often other ships are not allowed to go because they appear always to be missing something. These are gestures of hate towards our brothers and sisters. And thank you for what you do. And with that, the Holy Father's discourse has come to an end. And for those of you who cannot see screens, we are currently being shown the memorial. Now, Junior Tano, a young migrant, is reading a passage from the Acts of the Apostles. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium, about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous, because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them.
Mes amis, je vois que la navigation ne se fera pas sans
Men,
dommage.
I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and to cargo and to our own lives also. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and of the owner of the ship. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called northeaster, swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them. He said, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss." When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach, where they decided to run the ship around if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta.
Mon Dieu,
can hear the choir singing. In the background, for those of you who cannot see images, the Cathedral of Notre Dame de la Garde, Our Lady of the Garde. Beautiful setting around as the sun begins to set just over the port of Marseille. And now we hear prayer intentions read by different representatives of associations helping migrants. Today, millions of people are thrown onto the roads and seas of the world by war, poverty, political or religious persecution.
Oh Dieu, nous te prions.
O God, we pray to you. And the response is sung by the choir, Father of all peoples, hear our prayer. And they are repeating that. From Stella Maris, Father Jean-Philippe Rigaud. Light their way, guide them without ceasing, so that none may be lost, so that they may find doors and hearts open to welcome them, a land to rest in, a future for themselves and their children. O God, we pray to you. Father of all peoples, hear our prayer, is the response sung by the choir.
Éloigne d'eux la tentation de violence.
From Caritas Gapriasson, Monsignor Xavier Mal. Remove from them the temptation to violence and despair, so that they may find in you, Lord, the source of hope in the difficulties they may experience. O God, we pray to you.
À ceux qui ont la charge de les accueillir, donne un cœur
From the Diocesan Migrant Pastoral Service. To those who are responsible for welcoming them, give them a humble heart, so that they can listen to these exiled men and women and get to know and understand them. O God, we pray to you.
À ceux qui ont la charge de les accueillir,
to those who welcome them, teach them to serve without judgment. Make them instruments of your peace. For them, Lord, we pray to you. That is the end of the prayer intentions, and now the Holy Father concludes with a prayer.
Seigneur, personne n'est pour toi étranger.
Lord, no one is a stranger to you, and no one is so far away that you cannot help them. Look in your goodness on the refugees, the exiles, those whom the world rejects, and the children separated from their families. Grant them a homeland, and give us, towards the poor and the stranger, the care that you show them. And now we hear the Ubi Caritas.
Ubi Caritas, Deus imites. Ubi Caritas, et
As the music continues, it also marks the end of the prayer time and brings this meeting of the Holy Father with religious leaders of Marseille to a close. And the Holy Father is being wheeled off the stage, and we are expecting him to move closer towards the monument dedicated to those lost at sea, but for now he is greeting a young girl who has handed him a piece of paper and perhaps a drawing, perhaps a letter. It looks like there is text on it, and the Holy Father blesses her, and before she turns away, hands her a rosary. And another young girl has approached the Holy Father, who gives her a rosary too, and she is clearly very happy. The Holy Father is waving at the faithful as he moves away from the stage. It's a small congregation present, just a few people, making it intimate on the beautiful hilltop overlooking the sea. And the Holy Father is now in front of the monument dedicated to all those lost at sea. And I mentioned before, and now we can see it better, the monument is a Camargue cross, bringing together the symbols of the three theological virtues, which are faith within, in this case, is represented by the cross at the very top of the monument. Then hope is represented by the anchor, which is at the very bottom of the monument, and of course charity, which is represented by the heart. And all three of these symbols very simply but beautifully flow into one another. And a wreath has just been laid at the foot of the monument, and the Holy Father is greeting two migrants who one of them has given him a card. It looks like it is a card, and the Holy Father now gives each of the two young men a rosary, and they gather in silent reflection at the foot of the monument. It appears that the Cardinal Archbishop of Marseille, Jean-Marc Aveline, is explaining what I just explained to you to the Holy Father. He was pointing to the cross and the heart and the anchor. And it appears that the moment of reflection is over, and the Holy Father is being wheeled out. And on his way out, he greets once more some of the representatives of the various associations present, working towards helping migrants at sea, as well as different leaders of different religions, which, as we heard before from the Cardinal Archbishop of Marseille, they are representing all of the religions that are present in Marseille. And It is wonderful to know that this fight towards helping the migrants at sea, towards helping those fleeing, as we heard, poverty, persecution, and all kinds of horrors, are protected by all of the religions. It is, as the Holy Father has mentioned several times, this fraternity and love for our brothers and sisters, it's common in all our religions. And now we see a selfie being taken with the Holy Father. A lady who is very happy to see the Holy Father, clearly, as are all of the faithful gathering for this event. And the Holy Father has approached a group of faithful, and they are all handing him texts and letters and are kneeling down to hear what he has to say.
Ceux de la montagne, oui, oui, ça c'est la mer.
There are representatives of SOS Méditerranée. And just a reminder of what the Holy Father is doing in Marseille. He is marking his 44th apostolic journey there, abroad, excuse me, and in Marseille, particularly because he is on Saturday, so tomorrow he will be attending the concluding session of the Mediterranean meetings, and these are church-led initiatives or conferences which are held annually in a different city or town in Mediterranean countries. The first one was held in Italy, and then the year after it was stopped due to COVID, picked up again in Italy once more, and now it is currently taking place in Marseille in France. The Holy Father is approaching his car, and he will be leaving shortly. And this ends the live broadcast of the Marian prayer with religious leaders and the prayer at the memorial for lives lost in the Mediterranean. And please visit the Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube accounts for coverage of the rest of the Holy Father's journey to Marseille. On behalf of Vatican Media, I would like to thank all of our media partners: Salt and Light TV, EWTN TV, Atmadashan TV India, Shalom World Television Networks USA, Catholic Faith Network, Catholic TV and UCTV, Uganda Catholic Television, as well as our in-studio audio technicians and our coordinator, without whom none of these broadcasts would be possible. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining us this Friday evening. My name is Francesca Merlo, and it has been an absolute pleasure to be with you today. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.
Merci pour l'accompagnement des migrants. Gloire à Dieu, je suis très contente aujourd'hui. Je suis dans la joie. Le Saint-Père nous a bénis. Gloire à Dieu. Merci Seigneur.
Sono felice di iniziare la mia visita.
The French port city of Marseille is all set to welcome